I never imagined that the hardest part of losing my husband would not be his funeral, but what came just hours after it. The sun had barely set on the same day I laid my husband, Jonathan, to rest, when my daughter Harper stood in front of me, holding a stack of legal paper. Her eyes were completely dry. There was no grief on her face, no softness in her voice. She looked straight at me and said, "Sign the house over to me or start packing your things. I want you out if you are not willing to be reasonable." My heart stopped. This was the home Jonathan and I built over 35 years of marriage. Every wall had a memory. We planted the trees in the backyard together. We watched our daughter play in these rooms. Jonathan always said, "This house is our legacy to you when I am gone. I never want you to feel alone in it." And now, the very person I brought into this world was asking me to give it away like it meant nothing. My name is Evelyn Moore. I am 58 years old, newly widowed, and still trying to understand how my life changed so quickly. My husband, Jonathan, was a kind man with a gentle smile. He passed after a sudden heart attack, leaving me shocked and deeply shaken. Harper is my only child. She is 32, a successful real estate broker who believes emotions only get in the way of progress. She loved her father, but she never agreed with the way he protected me. She always said he made me weak. I never believed my own daughter would turn against me the moment he was gone. She placed the documents on the table and crossed her arms. "This house is too big for you. You cannot afford the taxes on your own. I will put it under my name so we do not lose it. You should be thanking me." Another voice entered the room. It was Harper's husband, Ryan. He leaned against the doorway with a small smile, as if this was just another business deal. He did not offer a hug or a compassionate word. He said, "Harper is trying to protect family assets. If you are not in a position to handle them, the smart thing is to transfer ownership." I stood there in silence. The house felt suddenly cold. I felt like a stranger in my own home. I signed the paper, not because I agreed, but because in that moment, my grief was too deep to fight. My hands were shaking so much the pen nearly slipped. Harper picked up the documents without a thank you and said, "That was the right decision. Tomorrow morning I will be here to discuss the next steps." She turned and walked out the door. It clicked shut behind her, and for the first time since Jonathan's death, I felt a different kind of pain, one that came not from loss, but from betrayal. If you are watching this right now, please hit the subscribe button and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. This is a story every family needs to hear. The night after the funeral was long and silent. I sat alone in our bedroom, holding Jonathan's favorite sweater. It still carried the faint scent of his cologne. I tried to pray, but my thoughts were too crowded. I could not understand how Harper could speak to me that way on the very day we buried her father. I told myself she was in shock, that grief changes people, but my heart knew better. There was something calculated in her voice, something that had been waiting beneath the surface for a long time. I walked through the house and looked around. The family photos on the walls, the worn-out spot on the sofa where Jonathan used to sit every evening, the wind chime he bought me last Christmas still hanging near the back door. It all reminded me of the life we shared. I thought of the mornings Jonathan would bring me coffee in bed and say, "As long as these walls stand, you will never be alone." I whispered those words aloud and promised myself I would not let his memory be erased. Harper had not hugged me once since his death, not at the hospital, not at the funeral. She had stood tall beside the casket, emotionless, accepting condolences like a politician at a public event. People whispered that she was being strong, but I saw something else. She had already moved past sadness. She was thinking about control. Harper was always ambitious. As a child, she wanted to win every argument. As a teenager, she accused us of holding her back when we tried to set boundaries. After she became successful in real estate, she began to speak to me as if she was the parent and I was a helpless child. Jonathan always told me not to take it personally. "She will grow out of it," he said, but she never did. I made tea and sat by the window. The house was quiet, but my mind was racing. I did not know what Harper had planned for the next morning, but I knew one thing for sure. She no longer saw me as her mother. She saw me as an obstacle. That night, as I turned off the lights, I touched the front door and made a silent promise. Jonathan, I will protect what you left behind. I will not let our home become a trophy for someone else's ego. I did not yet know what would happen in the morning, but I could feel a change rising inside me. My grief was slowly turning into strength. Something inside me whispered, "This is not the end. This is the beginning of a battle you never expected to fight." The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. I did not sleep much during the night, but for the first time since Jonathan's death, I did not wake up with tears in my eyes. Instead, I felt a steady, focused calm. I went into the kitchen and made coffee the way Jonathan used to make it for me. As I stirred the cup, I caught my reflection in the window. My face looked worn and tired, but my eyes did not look defeated anymore. Something inside me had shifted. I was still grieving, but my grief was no longer making me weak. It was making me aware. I heard the sound of a car door closing. It was early, too early for visitors. I looked through the front window and saw Harper and her husband, Ryan, walking up the pathway with determined steps. Harper was holding a folder in her hand, while Ryan carried a measuring tape and a clipboard. It did not take me long to understand what this meant. They were not just here to talk, they were here to start taking control. The front door opened before I could reach it. Harper did not bother to knock. She stepped into the house and said in a voice that sounded rehearsed, "We need to get started immediately. The contractor will be here in an hour to walk through the property." Ryan walked past me as if I were invisible, looking at the walls and ceilings with the cold curiosity of someone inspecting a building they had just bought. I stood still, holding my coffee cup tightly. "Harper," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "I never agreed to any contractor. You said we would discuss things." She gave me a look that was part annoyance, part pity. "You signed the house over, Mom. That was the discussion. I need to make sure the house is updated before the market drops. We are not going to waste time." My hands began to tremble. I set the coffee cup down on the table because I feared I might drop it. "Updated for what?" I asked quietly. "To sell," she said plainly. "There is no reason for you to stay here. You can rent a small condo or live with one of your sisters. This house is valuable. Dad left you with no retirement. It is irresponsible for you to hold on to this when it can secure your future." A cold feeling ran through me. Your father did not want this house sold. He wanted it preserved for our family. Harper's eyes hardened. "Dad is gone, and you are thinking emotionally, not practically. I know you are fragile right now, so I am stepping in to make adult decisions. This is not personal. This is simply smart." Ryan nodded in agreement. "The market is good now. If we wait, we might lose hundreds of thousands of dollars. You should be grateful Harper is managing this for you." I looked at them both, and for a brief second, I wondered if they were even capable of hearing themselves. Harper had always been competitive, but this was not competition. It was conquest. She was acting like a general seizing land after a battle, and I, her mother, was the one being conquered. Harper opened her folder and took out a sheet of paper. "Here is a list of items in the house that will be sold separately at auction. You can select a few sentimental items to keep, but everything else will go. We need to remove clutter before staging." I took the list from her hand and looked at it. It included Jonathan's collection of books, his grandfather clock, the dining table he built by hand, and even the bench where we sat every morning to drink coffee. My throat tightened. Harper spoke again before I could respond. "We will start upstairs. Ryan will measure the rooms. You can pack your things, or I can hire someone to do it for you, but we need to be efficient." I set the paper down and looked at my daughter. "Harper, I have just lost my husband, and now you want to take my home. Do you hear yourself?" She did not flinch. "You are not being removed. You are transitioning. This is what responsible people do." Ryan chimed in sharply. "Let's not get emotional. This is a business decision." That was the moment I truly understood that they did not just want control. They wanted ownership of my life. They believed I was weak, alone, and easy to push aside. They thought my quiet grief meant surrender. I straightened my back and met Harper's eyes with a calm I did not know I still had. "I will not be packing anything today," I said. My voice was steady. Harper looked surprised. She was not used to resistance from me. Ryan stopped measuring and turned toward us. Harper crossed her arms. You already signed the deed, Mom. This is happening whether you accept it or not. I looked at the papers, then at my daughter, and felt a strength rising in my chest like a steady flame. You may think you have won, I said, but you do not understand everything yet. Her expression shifted from irritation to confusion. For the first time, she seemed unsure. The silence between us was heavy, but I no longer felt afraid of it. As Harper and Ryan moved around the house, I walked into the kitchen and placed my hands on the counter to steady myself. I could hear them upstairs opening doors and speaking in short, businesslike tones, as if my home had already been turned into a property listing. Something inside me settled at that moment, not in defeat, but in clarity. I realized that I had been living under the belief that being quiet meant being powerless. But quiet can also be controlled. Quiet can be strategic. I reached for my phone and called the one person I trusted above everyone else, my nephew, Noah Bennett. Noah was the son of my late sister, Rebecca. He had grown up spending summers in this house, playing in the backyard, eating Jonathan's pancakes every Sunday morning. Now, at 29, he was a licensed attorney known for his strong moral convictions and loyalty to family. When he answered the phone, his voice was concerned. Aunt Evelyn, is everything all right? No, I said, holding back tears. Harper is trying to sell the house. There was a long pause, and when he spoke again, his tone had completely changed. It was no longer gentle. It was firm and focused. Did you sign anything? Yes, I admitted. I signed the deed yesterday, a day after Uncle Jonathan's funeral. His voice sharpened. That may qualify as emotional coercion. When did she present the papers? Just a few hours after we buried him, I replied. She said if I didn't sign, she would force me out of the house. I heard a deep breath on the other end. Aunt Evelyn, listen to me very carefully. That signature might not be legally binding. There are protections in place for surviving spouses, especially when signatures are made under emotional distress or during the immediate grieving period. I need you to stay calm. Do not argue with her. Do not challenge her directly. Let her believe everything is going according to plan. His words washed over me like a wave of strength. For the first time in days, I felt supported, not alone. What should I do now? I asked. I will be there within 2 hours, he replied. In the meantime, do not leave the house. Do not give them any indication that you are taking action. Just continue as if you are accepting their decisions. I will take care of the legal side. As I hung up, Ryan called down from upstairs. Do you want to keep any of these photos, or should we box them all? Every photo on that wall held decades of memories. Birthdays, anniversaries, quiet afternoons in the garden. I felt a fire rising in my chest. Not a fire of anger, but a fire of purpose. Leave everything where it is, I said firmly. Harper came downstairs and studied my expression. You look different, she said cautiously. I am tired, I replied. Do what you need to do. She nodded, mistaking my calm for surrender. You will thank me when this is over, she said. Inside I thought, no, Harper. You will be the one forced to face what you have done. I walked slowly through the living room and into Jonathan's office. The room was exactly as he left it. His reading glasses on the desk, an unfinished crossword puzzle, a framed photo of the two of us from our wedding anniversary. It was here that Jonathan once told me, if anything ever happens to me, protect our home. Do not let anyone take it from you, not even those you love. Those words echoed in my mind. At that moment, I felt his presence, not in a mystical sense, but in the steady courage that filled my heart. Grief had made me quiet, but love was making me strong. Harper and Ryan soon left to meet the contractor, confident they were only days away from complete control. The moment their car pulled out of the driveway, I closed the front door gently and locked it. Then, I went to the kitchen table and sat with my hands folded, waiting. Noah arrived exactly when he said he would. He walked in with a briefcase and a determined look in his eyes. We are going to place an emergency injunction on the property, he said. We will freeze any transactions and file a motion declaring the deed invalid due to coercion and emotional duress. Harper does not know it yet, but she has already crossed legal boundaries. I watched him spread documents across the table. He explained every step clearly and calmly, never once making me feel small or foolish. Instead, he spoke to me with respect, as someone worthy of protection and justice. As he worked, I felt something inside me unlock. It was not just relief. It was the realization that I had been carrying guilt for being vulnerable. Now I understood that vulnerability did not mean weakness. It meant I was human, and being human also meant I had the right to stand up for myself. By the time Noah finished filing the emergency paperwork, the sun was beginning to set. The house was quiet again, but this time the silence felt different. It no longer felt like the beginning of an ending. It felt like the calm before a storm I was finally ready to face. For the first time since Jonathan's death, I did not feel alone. I felt protected. I felt ready. And Harper had no idea what was coming. The next morning began unlike any other. There was no heaviness in the air, no trembling in my hands. Instead, I felt a calm strength, as though a quiet shield had formed around me during the night. I made breakfast and set the table, not because I expected peace, but because I wanted to face what was coming with dignity. At exactly 8 o'clock, I heard the familiar sound of Harper's car pulling into the driveway. The tires crunched against the gravel, then silence. A moment later, the front door handle turned, and Harper walked in without knocking, followed closely by Ryan and 2 strangers in suits carrying clipboards. I stayed seated at the table as they entered the dining room. Harper placed a folder on the table in front of me with the kind of confidence that had always made people step aside for her. She did not ask if she could sit. She simply sat down and said, "The listing draft is ready. If we sign off today, we can have this property on the market by Friday." Ryan added, "We also need you to start packing your personal items. We have scheduled the staging team for tomorrow afternoon. The faster we move, the higher the sale price." I looked at the folder, then slowly lifted my eyes to meet theirs. Harper leaned back, satisfied that everything was falling into place. She had no idea she was moments away from losing control of the narrative she had carefully constructed in her mind. Before I could speak, footsteps echoed from down the hallway. Harper turned, visibly annoyed. Noah walked into the dining room carrying a briefcase, his expression composed but firm. Harper's eyes narrowed. "What is he doing here?" she demanded. Noah did not answer her directly. Instead, he placed his briefcase on the table, opened it, and pulled out a stack of documents. He spoke in a steady voice that carried weight. "I am here as legal counsel for Evelyn Moore. Effective immediately, all actions concerning this property are frozen under a court-ordered injunction." A tense silence filled the room. One of the men in suits adjusted his glasses and stepped forward. "On what ground?" Noah looked directly at Harper. "On the grounds of emotional coercion, fraudulent intent, and exploitation of a grieving spouse under duress. This property transfer is legally invalid until a formal hearing is conducted. You had no right to initiate sale proceeding, and any attempt to do so moving forward will be considered an act of real estate fraud. You could face criminal charges." Harper's face flushed bright red. She stood up sharply, knocking her chair back. "This is my house," she snapped. Noah calmly slid a document toward her. "No, this house is legally protected under spousal rights. Evelyn is the surviving spouse, and by law, she maintains full occupancy and decision-making authority unless she willingly relinquishes it under sound mental and emotional capacity, which she did not. Presenting legal documents to a grieving widow within 24 hours of her husband's funeral is unlawful manipulation. You took advantage of your own mother while she was in a vulnerable state." Ryan stepped forward, trying to regain control. "We were helping her. She cannot maintain this property on her own." Noah turned to him sharply. "We have audio messages, text records, and witness statements indicating that both of you plan to sell this property quickly for profit and move the funds into an investment account under your names. We also have evidence that you contacted contractors and staging companies before Evelyn even signed the deed, which proves premeditated intent." Harper's voice broke through the tension. "You went through my messages?" Noah looked at her without blinking. No, your husband did when he forwarded your emails to a shared business account by mistake. Those emails are now evidence. Harper looked at Ryan in disbelief as the men in suits, the contractor and stager, quietly picked up their clipboards and stepped away, clearly wanting no involvement in whatever was unfolding. Harper turned back to me, anger flashing in her eyes. "You set me up," she accused. My voice was calm. "I protected myself, and I protected your father's legacy. You walked into this house with greed in your heart, not love." Harper opened her mouth to speak, but Noah continued, his tone firm but professional. "From this moment forward, you are not permitted to make any decisions about this property. If you attempt to enter this house without legal permission, we will pursue a restraining order." Harper pressed her hand against the table, trying to steady herself. She looked at me with disbelief, as if she were seeing me clearly for the first time. "You cannot do this to me," she insisted. "I am your daughter." I stood slowly, feeling the weight of every word that left my mouth. A daughter protects her mother. A daughter stands beside family during grief. You came here not to comfort me, but to remove me. You chose money over blood. This is not something I did to you. This is something you did to yourself. Harper looked at Ryan for support, but his eyes were lowered. The silence in the room now belonged to me. For years I had been quiet because I believed that was the only way to keep peace. But this moment was not about peace. It was about truth, and the truth stood firmly on my side. As Harper stared at the injunction papers in disbelief, I realized that everything had changed. Harper had come to take my home. Instead, she had been forced to face what she had become. And in that moment, without raising my voice, without losing my dignity, I had won a battle I never thought I would have the strength to fight. The silence after Harper left was different this time. It was not the silence of grief or uncertainty. It was the kind of silence that follows a storm, when the air is clear and steady, and you finally feel the weight lifting off your shoulders. For the first time since Jonathan's passing, I did not feel like a widow fighting alone. I felt like a woman who had reclaimed her life. As Noah packed up his briefcase, he looked at me with quiet pride and said, "You did the hardest part today. You stood up for yourself when it mattered." I smiled at him, and for a brief moment, I allowed myself to breathe. My hands no longer trembled. My voice no longer broke when I spoke. I felt a strength I had almost forgotten I had. After Noah left, I walked through the house room by room, touching the walls with new awareness. These were not just walls. They were chapters of my life. This house had held my laughter, my pain, my motherhood, my marriage, and now my awakening. I stood in the doorway of Jonathan's study, where the afternoon sunlight spilled across his desk. It felt as though he were there with me, reminding me of every promise he ever made, that I was capable, that I was worthy, and that I was stronger than I believed. I whispered, "Jonathan, I kept my promise. I protected our home." Over the next few days, Harper made several attempts to contact me, first with aggression, then with excuses, and finally with silence. She left messages saying she had been trying to protect me, that she only wanted what was best. But those words had come too late. Actions speak louder than apologies spoken after exposure. For years, I had told myself Harper would someday change. I had convinced myself that if I just stayed loving and patient, she would eventually value family over ambition. But Jonathan used to say, "Love does not mean allowing someone to hurt you. Love means standing firm so they can see the truth they are running from." Now I finally understood. One afternoon, Harper came to the door. She did not try to walk inside. She stood on the porch, her eyes red from crying. There was no folder in her hands, no pen, no contracts, just vulnerability. "Mom," she said softly, "I lost control. I see that now. I was scared of losing everything after Dad died. I thought controlling the house would make me feel safe." Her voice broke, and for the first time in a very long time, she looked like the little girl who used to crawl into bed with me during thunderstorms. I listened quietly. I did not respond with anger. I did not raise my voice or remind her of her betrayal. I simply said, "You have a choice now, Harper. You can continue chasing control, or you can choose connection. But the door to this house is no longer a door to ownership. It is a door to family. If you enter again, it must be with respect and love, not power." She nodded slowly, tears falling down her cheeks. She whispered, "I want my mother back." I felt my own eyes fill with tears, not because everything was magically fixed, but because a seed of truth had finally been planted in her heart. Healing would not be instant, but healing had begun. Later that evening, I sat outside on the porch with a blanket over my shoulder. The sky was glowing shades of orange and pink, the colors Jonathan always loved. In that moment, I realized that this house was not just protected legally, it was protected spiritually. It had become the symbol of my journey from grief to strength, from silence to empowerment. I no longer saw myself as a broken widow, but as a woman who had walked through fire and emerged with her own identity. Life did not go back to the way it was before. It became something new, something stronger. I began volunteering at a local community center, helping widows navigate legal and emotional challenges after losing their spouses. I turned my pain into purpose. I started hosting Sunday dinners for Noah, my nieces, and a few neighbors who had become like family. There was laughter in the house again, not because everything was perfect, but because love had reclaimed its place. As I set the table one evening, I looked at the empty chair where Jonathan used to sit. Instead of sadness, I felt gratitude. His physical presence was gone, but his faith in me had brought me back to life. The house remained mine, not because of a court order, but because I chose not to surrender my worth. I want to leave you with this. No matter who tries to take your peace, your home, or your dignity, remember that quiet strength is more powerful than loud control. You do not need to fight with anger. You simply need to stand in truth. If this story touched your heart, make sure to subscribe to my channel and comment where in the world you are watching from. Your support helps these stories reach more people who need strength and hope.